In this podcast episode, we want to introduce you to our BCEN friend, Sarah McLelland. We are going to follow a little different format in this Halloween special episode. Listen as Michael Dexter and Mark Eggers talk with Sarah about Charity Hospital in New Orleans as she shares her own stories and stories of other nurses. Of course, we still have the rapid-fire questions, but Halloween is the main flavor of this podcast night. This episode is called Frights and Delights. It's Halloween.
Hello, and welcome to BCEN and Friends podcast, where we hold interesting conversations about learning with a range of thought leaders, BCN certification holders, and industry professionals. But most importantly, to create value and insight for you, our professional nurses across the emergency spectrum. We hope you find our discussions interesting, informative, sometimes funny, sometimes serious, but always valuable. I'm Mark Eggers, Education Technology Services Manager. I'm joined today by my co-host, Michael Dexter, Director of Professional Development at BCEN. Hi, Michael.
Hey, Mark. Great to be with you.
In this episode of BCEN and Friends, we have Sarah McLelland. Michael, could you tell us about our friend, BCEN friend, Sarah?
Yeah, absolutely. Sarah is a good friend of mine. I've known for several years now. She's been a nurse for 22 years. She started on a trauma surgery floor at the very well-known Charity Hospital in New Orleans, and then moved to the ED to begin her journey in emergency nursing. After 4 years at Charity, she decided to travel and did so for 4 years at various hospitals around the country, including level 1 trauma centers in New York, Los Angeles, Miami, and San Diego, to name a few. She returned to New Orleans in 2008 and served in many leadership roles at her current facility, where she is now working as a clinical educator for the emergency department. Needless to say, she has certainly dealt with her share of unique and interesting patient encounters over the years. She currently serves as chair of the Louisiana Emergency Nursing Association Education Committee, is an item writer for the CEN practice exam, and hosts online certification jeopardy games to encourage engagement and certification within her state. Sarah has been recognized as Nurse Educator of the Year by the Louisiana ENA in 2016, Mentor of the Year by her home facility, and is a recipient of the Daisy Award. She holds a master's degree and 2 bachelor degrees, with one being her BSN, and has achieved certifications for CEN, TCRN, CPEN, and is a SANE-A, adult SANE nurse. So Sarah, welcome. It's good to have you with us today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So for our listening audience, today's podcast is going to have a little different format. We talked with Sarah a few months ago, and somehow we got on the subject of stories that nurses have told that have been strange, spooky, weird, and just plain haunting. So we thought, why not a Halloween podcast of creepy nurse stories? Welcome to Frights and Delights. It's Halloween.
Yeah. So Sarah, why don't we start out, before we get into some of the stories, why don't we just start out a little bit more talking about Charity Hospital. Charity Hospital is very well known. There was a hospital that many physicians, many nurses were trained at for a number of years. And then it's since Hurricane Katrina has now no longer become a hospital. So why don't you tell us a little bit more about Charity Hospital and your experience there?
It was an amazing experience, and I feel very honored that I was able to start my career there. I was completely humbled by the opportunity, very respectful of that. It was an institution, a complete institution. And so if you got to train there, you're extremely lucky. And I was surrounded by phenomenal coworkers and mentors and preceptors that got me where I am today. So it was, I wouldn't trade it for the world. And I feel very lucky that I was able to, have that as part of my journey. Just the hospital in general, it is an old building. I guess I should have looked up when it was actually built, but it's extremely old. It is still standing. It is a historical building, so they are trying to restore it currently. I'm not sure to what, but I started out, like you said, on the trauma surgery floor. And but when you walked in immediately, there was this, through the front doors, there was like you walked into this big rotunda. It was like 2 stories higher. It seems that way to me. When you're a little kid, everything seems bigger, but it was just this massive rotunda. And there was these huge pictures of the nuns, because the Nuns of Charity are what started that organization and that institution. And these massive oil paintings, and they had the flying nun hats on. And late at night when there was a little place you got to go get your grilled cheese or whatever to grill outside. It was just kind of, I don't know, I swear it's that, the oil paintings that they have in the museums or in those old houses that it seems like the eyeballs like follow you when you walk somewhere.
Yeah.
I always felt like that. I was like, oh goodness. But on the floor where I worked, again, it was just an older facility. There was, the tiled floors. The walls were actually like ceramic tile through halfway up. So there was just a lot of echoes and things like that. And one of the things, I think we had mentioned it before, when I was going back up to, my ward to after my lunch, I got off the elevator and it was like a long hall, but it seemed much longer because it was so scary. It looked like it kind of narrowed at the end, which was totally not true, but that's how I felt. And there was a fluorescent light like flickering with that buzzy sound, and there was water dripping somewhere that was echoing, like that creepy, like, I'm not going to do it with my finger, but the dropping noise of water. Yes, the dropping noise of water. And then there was, they had wooden wheelchairs, very high backed, that had like metal wheels, and they looked like something out of like a psych ward, but that's not where I was. But I just remember the light flickering. The wheelchair was kind of askew in the hallway under that flickering light, and there was echoes everywhere with that water dripping, and almost I wanted to like just run past it and get to my and get to my ward. But it just kind of, as a young nurse and being totally just brand new on the job, I was like, this is creepy. And I was happy to get into my little safe space. So when I got past it, but yeah, that's kind of just how the hospital was. It was just old and echoey, and it was just things that happened, but there's just, between the paintings and the stories and the history and everything, it was just something to definitely, be in awe of and be super respectful of and be scared of all the same time. So
it sounds like an interesting place. Tell us about the name of the cafeteria.
Oh, it wasn't the official name, but it was called the Fistula. It was a building out front where I had gone to get my grilled cheese, and it was open. You had to go in one end and go out the other. So it's open on both ends, and it never closed. So that's why they called it the Fistula. And I had so many grilled cheese from there that Miss Rhonda, she used so much butter it would just drip. But yeah, everybody went there to the Fistula to get their meal in the middle of the night.
And that was when she was, I think you told me last time, she would sit there with a cigarette hanging out of her mouth and fixing your fish.
It would be an ash at least an inch long, and you're like, please don't follow my grilled cheese. Please don't follow my grilled cheese. And it never did. She was, I don't know how she worked it not to, but yeah, it would just, so yeah. Absolutely. It's just those good memories that I have that are just, they're funny. And like I said, I feel very fortunate to have them because it's, it's not there anymore. And, I feel so lucky. It's fun.
Yeah, that's really neat. And I think a lot of people, I've worked with some physicians in the past that had, that did their residency at Charity and told me some similar stories. And every time I hear stories about that, it makes me laugh. It's just such a unique place, such an interesting place for people to learn, for patients that we're taking care of. Again, the wooden wheelchairs with the high backs and these things that you hear about or you may have seen pictures of, but it seems like all of the things that you may have heard about in the past, it's like they all happened at one hospital, at Charity Hospital. And it's very interesting that you were able to be a part of that. Yeah.
And they had the theaters too, where the surgery would sometimes be going on down in the pit, if you will, with almost like the Coliseum sitting around it. They are in the process of redoing it, and they were actually selling parts of the Historical Society as a heavy hand in it and making sure it's done appropriately. And the company that's doing it, they were actually, to help make money for the foundation, some of the nurses' stations were made of marble. And so they were chopping the marble off, they would set it, let you purchase it, like people use them for like cheese boards and stuff. If you worked on a certain unit, they would try to get it off of that unit. But room 4 was the famous trauma room that was in the emergency department. It was iconic, and it was just like a big room with 2 sides split down the middle with a wall that had the monitors and stuff on it. But they were selling tiles off of the wall from room 4, just like little 4x4 6x6 maybe tiles, and I went and bought one, and it was really cool. And I was able to get a quick glimpse into the facility. The guy that was there remembered me. He was a paramedic that was kind of running the stuff, and he just gave a very, brief show around, and it was really neat. We went down into the hyperbaric chamber. That's where a lot of it started. We had one of our physicians that was one of the pioneers in hyperbaric treatment, and now I don't know what they look like, but this looked like these tanks, the old scuba divers. It's the round helmet with the kind of the lattice work mesh over the front of the hole. That's what those tanks looked like submarine type stuff, where they were doing hyperbarics back in before I was there, probably before I was born, like old school original stuff when it was started. So just having a glimpse of that was really, just really cool to see. And it was really weird when I was walking through there. You could just feel it. I don't know how to explain it. There was nothing crazy. There wasn't any ghosts or anything like that, but you could just get a sense of just the history of the place. It was a physical feeling just from being inside the building. So it was really good experience. I got to go see the old room 4 and all the areas that I had worked there as a young nurse. They didn't look the same because they didn't have patients or anything, in them, or some of the structures had been altered or taken down. But it was a cool opportunity to see. But I was very aware that I could just feel it. I can't explain it.
Yeah.
But it was just, I don't know. It was awesome.
So did the hair on the back of your neck ever go up occasionally when you were there?
No. That night in the hall when it was dripping, when I was coming back from the fistula, yes. Yeah. I felt like I needed to kind of go like this, get a start, and then just run past the wheelchair and under the flickering light and everything. But I was actually nervous for a second. So yes, the hair on the back of my neck stood up then. Also, but once I got more comfortable with the building, it's almost like you are comfortable with that feeling of, just the feeling that existed inside of it.
For our listeners that don't know what Charity Hospital is, where it is, anything like that, can you tell us just briefly where it's located and what happened to it?
Sure. So Charity Hospital is located in downtown New Orleans. It's this amazing building. If anybody's familiar with Los Angeles County Hospital, it almost looks exactly the same type of architecture and like cement on the outside. I don't know how many stories it had, but it had tunnels under the streets that went next door to the med school. Just a phenomenal, huge building. And I remember when I was leaving a travel nurse, I didn't want to leave. And the last thing they said, this place isn't going anywhere. You go do your thing and you can always come back. And while I was gone, Hurricane Katrina hit and it completely just devastated the city of New Orleans. So there's a documentary about it called The Spirit of Charity. I don't know if it's, for people to get to watch it. I don't know if it's on Netflix. I don't know where it is, but when that came out, some researchers and it was really well done, very respectfully done, and very just good. And if you worked there, you could send your name in and they would confirm that. And so there's a theater on Canal Street called the Joy Theater. And so if you had been verified that you worked there, you could go to the premiere viewing of this big charity, I think it was called, of the movie that was done. And so it was really cool to be in there and watch it with people that I hadn't seen in years, and some I didn't know, but we were all there and everybody remembered Charity, had a piece of it in their heart. And it was just very emotional watching, because it was some pre-film that I guess they got from somewhere, but the post-film and the disaster and just the things that the staff and the patients went through after Katrina is just very emotional. But it is a good story and tells a good history of the it was an institution. I don't know what else to say. So
yeah. Well, that's neat. You've done a lot of things. You've traveled around. You've been to some big areas. You've worked in some different hospitals around the country. You've worked in places like Miami, LA, New York, of course, New Orleans. Have you ever had any situation at any of the places you've worked where you've been just had some weird, crazy feelings with a morgue or with a patient or anything like that?
there was one time we went to at one of the facilities I worked at, to the morgue, and nurse I was with went to, walk out, I guess just go move the stretcher that we had, and the door closed on me, and it's like a refrigerator door with a seal, a very heavy seal, and I could not get out. There was no handle from the inside, which I think maybe they should look at that in case something happens to somebody else. But I was banging on the door. I mean, I knew he would realize I wasn't with him at some point, but I'm like, get me out. So, I had to be let out of there, and it was just because it's pitch black. You really can't see in front of your face. And I was like, get me out of here. So yes. And for those brief seconds, it felt like eternity. I don't know what I thought was going to happen, but I did not want to be in there. I was like, what did I think was going to happen? Nobody's going to get me. I'm in here, but it was just weird, and I wanted out.
Yeah, definitely. Well, we're talking about Halloween, and we're talking about some of the frights and delights of Halloween. And for me, it seems like, and I don't want this to come across the wrong way, but we have situations sometimes in the ER and it's definitely a time to be serious and a time to be with the family. And unfortunately, it seems like that happens frequently on Halloween, at least in my experience. And there's different nurses there that are dressed up as some, superhero or something. And it's hard to go out and tell the family, sorry, I look like Mickey Mouse right now. But have you had similar situations where you work?
Yes, I actually had one the other day. We had, because it's ER Nurses Week, and we had different days at our facility that we could wear, certain things. And one was Superhero Day. So I don't know if you remember the LENA event where Holly and I did the superheroes. So I had on a t-shirt that was this superwoman that had abs drawn on it. So it made me look very thin, illusion, of course, and a cape, Velcro cape. There was family around, and I wasn't a part of the care, but I was out there kind of helping with some other stuff. And I did have, I did take pause, and here I am walking around in a superwoman cape with fake abs and and this cape flying behind me. So yeah, it is challenging because you do these things in the ER, and it's not that we're desensitized, but I feel like some of this stuff we happen is just part of our day. Doesn't mean it doesn't affect us. It doesn't mean we don't care, but we just have to move along. We can't let that stuff stop us. And so it's like, well, off we went, and with my cape, yeah. So, but I see what you're saying. We're celebrating, we're doing something, some sort of employee engagement type of stuff, and then bad things happen all around us, and you try to be serious, but like you said, hi, I realize I look like Superwoman right now, but is there anything I can get you?
Right. Do you have any other stories that you wanted to share with us about just some of the funny or unique or even frightening things that have happened to you over the years?
There's lots of, funny random stories, but we have all kinds of festivals down here in New Orleans. And there was one, it was called Buku Fest. And then we also have a Voodoo Fest. And so it's always, it's a tourist town. I guess it attracts all kinds of people. Not lately, in the last 2 years, it's been very dormant. So when it does open back up, it's probably going to be, I don't know, a mad rush. But we had this, I don't know, some of those, like a lot of the alternative bands and stuff. And there was a lot of substance abuse going on. And these two girls came in, and I think they had done Molly or PCP or something, but they were in complete dissociated state, and they were covered in glow paint from head to toe, in glow paint, just splattered all over them, all over their face and their hair. And one was sitting Indian style on her stretcher, barking like a dog. And the other one was just in there, waving her arms around, playing with something in the air. But we could turn the lights out and see them, because we could see them perfectly, actually, fine with the lights out. And her friend continued to sit there and bark like a dog.
So, any other stories that you have that anybody has shared with you, or anything that you've heard from others while we've been talking about this that you wanted to share? with the
Actually,
listeners?
yeah, I did reach out when I knew we were doing this to some of, there's some people that I, still keep in touch with. And there is like a group that I reached out to, and I said, I'm excited to be a part of this. And I just asked some people for a couple of stories that used to work at charity. I don't know the people, I know one of them, but they were able to give me some stuff that they had experienced over the years, and they've been there much longer than I had. One of them was one of our respiratory therapists, and this is the text that she sent me. She said, I got off the elevator on the 7th floor heading to the old CT scanner while I was on a 16-hour shift. It was around 10 o'clock at night, so no one was around. The hall was completely empty. As I rounded the corner to head to CT, I was pushed at my shoulder as though someone had bumped into me, and I completely freaked out. I ran back to the elevator, pressing the button as fast as I could to get the door to open, and went back to the respiratory department to get someone to go back up with me. However, I love it now knowing that one of those sweet souls picked me to let me know they were there. So it's kind of scary. I mean, I would have been terrified, absolutely terrified. But when when you have time to reflect on it, it's just the spirits that are there, that the nuns created. Who knows? So it's that cool story. And
Wow.
then another one responded. She was an OR nurse, and she said they had one in particular. He always showed up at night, and he loved to move the bed, the sitting stools, turn on the water, and the scrub sink. He had lots of tricks. So those are just a couple of the charity stories that were relayed to me when I asked for them. So I'm sure there's many, many more. I just don't have access to the people that know to tell them. So
Yeah. Well, those are really interesting. Yeah. Thank you.
I absolutely believe them, because like I said, it was just a feeling. You weren't scared. You didn't feel threatened. It didn't feel creepy. It was just this, it's called the spirit of charity. And so it was just a really cool thing I understand that feeling, but I didn't have anyone push me on my shoulder. How long I stayed. So, yeah.
Well, those are really neat. Mark, did you have anything for Sarah?
And I appreciate you taking the time and telling us about all that. It's just things that go bump in the night, I guess.
Yeah, it was just the whole, especially starting my career there on night shift. I worked 11 p to 7 a. So I went in very close to midnight, and it was just, I don't know. It was an institution. It was just, you were in awe. I knew nothing different. It was my first job. So, they had it was the ward setting. So it was, 8 patients, and they had the beds where the 3 cranks at the foot of the bed, and they were like, "Nurse, I want my head up." So I'd have to go down there and literally pull out the one for the head and crank it up until they were in the right spot. But yeah, it was a great learning experience. And I would love to, hear more of the stories than I do know, but I still feel very thankful that I was able to, get the experience I did and have an understanding of just the reverence of that place. So it was really cool.
As I said, we're not following the same format we usually do, but we do have a few questions that we'll ask you. We got what's called rapid fire questions, and one of them is, if you weren't doing what you were doing now, what would you do? What would you do? What would something else you do if you weren't doing what you're doing today?
I would be a veterinarian, hands down.
Neat. That's very cool.
Well, and I think you said that you also volunteer at a shelter.
I do. I volunteer at one of our local animal shelters on Friday nights. I started out there on the med team, which is basically like just passing, certain animals are on thyroid medicine or heartworm treatment. I would just dole out medicines like you were on if I was a med surg nurse on a floor, just passing meds. Once COVID hit, they kind of stopped limiting people going inside the shelter, which is fine. So now I just go and walk dogs for a few hours every night, because they do a good job of getting the dogs out and getting them good walks at least 2 or 3 times a day.
Do you have any Halloween animal stories?
Halloween animal stories? Oh, I'm trying to think. Do I? No, other than just dressing my dogs up for pictures.
And I was going to ask you, do you have animals?
I do. I have 3 geriatric ones. I have a little dachshund named Frankie. She's 16. We have a little chihuahua I've had her since a puppy. We've got Toby that we rescued. He's 15. And then Ginger Pie is actually from the animal shelter I volunteer at. She's 18. Cool. And then we have, I have a cat named Conway Kitty.
Conway Kitty. I like it. I like it.
And if I ever get another cat, my dad was like, "You have to name it Catsy Klein. You cannot go." I'm like, "That's a great idea, but I'm not getting anybody else anytime soon."
Oh, I kid.
So yeah, I have a few. So my dachshund's the only one that I sought out. All the rest of them kind of needed somebody, and I'm a sucker. So
What's your dachshund's name?
her name is Frankie. And she actually got her as a puppy back in 2004. So she travel nursed with me. She flew on planes. She drove across country. She's lived in all these places.
Neat.
So
Very
yeah,
cool.
yeah.
So another rapid fire question. This one's a few different favorites. What's your favorite book?
My favorite book. I don't guess I necessarily have a favorite book, like a singular book, but I love the forensic murder mystery books. Of course, John Grisham is a favorite author of mine, so I read all of his stuff. But when I was living in New York, I had to work they put me in the psych area, and this was before cell phones. There was no cell phones, and I was just bored. And I found this book, a paperback book in a drawer. And I was like, I don't want to read this book. But after about 4 hours, I'm like, I'm going to read this book. And it was Dan Brown. It was actually the prequel to that Tom Hanks movie, Angels and Demons. It was the prequel to it. I can't remember what it was called. It's the very first one. And it talked a lot of it. The first like 2 chapters were nothing but completely factual chapters on like Catholicism and things like that. And I was just like, it was like, I'm going to read this because I literally have nothing else to do. But what happened was or maybe it was, anyway, as soon as I finished the book, that next one came out with the movie. So it was really cool to I jumped on the prequels and everything. And then I remember my sister-in-law was getting married in April, and her wedding day was the day that the Pope passed away, and they're Catholic. And so it was on the screen, and it was showing like the smoke coming out of the top of the cathedral. And like, what does that mean? I'm like, well, that means the Cardinals have gone in to vote on who's going to be the next person. And she's like, why do you know that? I'm like, well, I read this paperback book when I was trapped in a unit that I couldn't leave in New York, and it just kind of spiraled from there. So I actually kind of got a little bit out of that. But I like the serial killer mystery series. John Grisham, of course, but there's a lot of different authors that I like to read. Patricia Cornwell, I really like her books because she's a coroner, like, and does all the autopsies and stuff. So just one hand, you'd think I'd get away from it, but I really like that kind of stuff. So
that's good. How about a favorite movie?
My favorite movie would have to be, I don't know. I love the tie would have to be Shawshank Redemption and Top Gun. I know those are kind of cliche, but I'll watch them all day, every day. But my favorite movie that I watch every time that's on now, it's not like an Oscar winner or anything, but is Bridesmaids. With the Wilson Phillips song and the hot lava in the sink with Melissa McCarthy. And it just makes me laugh every single time. And it reminds me of like kind of my little tribe of girlfriends, how we're just always, getting into stuff and everything. But that movie's great. I love it.
And how about a favorite song?
A favorite song?
Or band, or singer, or...
Well, favorite singer. I love Reba McEntire. She's one of my favorite singers. I grew up listening to like the Judds, so kind of old country is my musical preference. When I started practicing driving, my truck had an 8-track. That's all it had in it, and my dad only had a few 8-tracks in it, so I was the only like 15-year-old that knew every word to like Papa Was a Rolling Stone and Eddie Rabbit, because that's all that would play in my truck. There was no real radio, but I love some Reba and Dolly and just some of the older, the old country singers. Hank Williams Jr. been to a million concerts. So
all good, yeah, all good. And how about if people want to follow you online on social media, where can they find you?
Well, I am on Facebook as Sarah McLelland, and I am on Instagram. It's Sarah with an H, because that's how I always have to spell it. Every time I say, "What is your name, Sarah?" Like with an H, I'm like, "Is there any other way?" But like sometimes people don't have them. I'm like, "Well, they should." So, Sarah with an H on Instagram. McLelland, Sarah with an H McLelland. So.
Cool.
And one thing I want to mention, just jumping in here to that, is that as we said earlier, Sarah and a friend of hers, Holly, have done a number of online Jeopardy games for the Louisiana ENA. And so if you follow Louisiana ENA on social media, you'll see some of these are posted there, and you can join. Anybody can join. But it's just a fun way to be engaged and to promote certification, promote engagement with emergency nursing, and do something fun that not everybody's doing.
Every time we do one, we're dressed up. I would say we suffer for our cost, but we don't, because we love it. We love to dress up. Even at the, you were there, Michael, at the, when you first probably met us, and we're like, who are these two and what are they doing? When we were first doing them live at the state conferences, we would dress up in costume just to make it, engaging. And so now with our online, we have a theme every time. And so we try to tailor the questions and the categories for the theme, but also dress up, which is a lot of fun on a Wednesday night.
There is an opening on Jeopardy if you would like to host it, but.
Right. I am so not smart. I can't pronounce half of that. Now, Saturday Night Live Jeopardy, I'm your girl. I love those with Norm Macdonald and all of them. Those are funny to watch, but yeah. I don't think I could hang with the contestants there.
Anything else, Michael, before we conclude today's podcast?
No, I don't think so. I think it's been fun. One thing I wanted to mention to all of our listeners, that this is a different format. It's a different episode, but I've really enjoyed it. And I think it's nice to just be able to talk about some old stories, talk about something unique to this one is more unique to Halloween in New Orleans and some of the things that happen down there. We'd love to get some listener stories around any holidays or any other events that are unique to emergency nursing, the way that those are treated.
I learned about holiday heart is like a real thing. When people consume, that's the first time I'd ever heard it called holiday heart. When they consume like too much alcohol and get dehydrated, sometimes it can put them into, a tachyarrhythmia. Sometimes they go into AFib, and it's an actual diagnosis called holiday heart that typically when people indulge around the holidays. So I don't know why that popped into my head, but I remember it.
Yeah, it's good. Well, and for our listeners, if you do have any stories, feel free to contact us at BCN@BCN.org. Holiday stories, heartwarming stories you think would make good on a podcast, and we can compile those all together and make a special episode again just for those. So that'd be great. But I want to thank you, Sarah, for taking the time to join us for a spectacular episode of BCN and Friends. Thank you for sharing your time, your stories, and just being with us. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. I'm honored to be a part of this. Anything I can do to, promote ER nurses, promote our profession, encourage people to get involved, I'm game for it. So thank you so much.
Thank you. And to all our listeners, we hope you'll stay tuned as we continue on with BCN and Friends and bring in new and meaningful content and perspectives. If you have a suggestion for an episode, please email us, as I said, at bcen@bcn.org. I am Mark Eggers here with Michael Dexter. On behalf of the entire BCN team, we thank and celebrate you for all that you are doing as professional nurses across the emergency spectrum. Don't forget to sleep with the lights on tonight. Until next time,